Okay, we're going to get going. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. I want to acknowledge, first of all, the tremendous volunteer efforts of a group of people called Festival Coquitlam. These are volunteers that work tirelessly at various events, including the Como Lake Fishing Derby and the upcoming Family Day Fishing Derby at Lafarge Lake on Father's Day. This past weekend, they did an exceptional job at an expanded and relocated version of the Teddy Bear Picnic and Grand Parade. I want to acknowledge those volunteers on behalf of Council and thank them, the sponsors, and all of the coordinators that did such a great job with that festival. I also want to congratulate the winner of the elected officials float contest, in spite of the fact that he didn't come close to being the most popular or even the most attractive entry. Councillor Hodge nonetheless somehow won. Councillor O'Neill believes he ought to have won, and both of them are ignoring the little cute dog that should have won. The people's choice.
You were cleverly ignoring the earlier spat about that.
Yeah, no, in fact, I was parlaying the earlier spat into something more greater than that. And since there's no possible way to transition into the other announcement I was going to make, I'll save it till the end. Mr. Clerk.
As always, minutes save the day. Item 1 is minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, May 29th. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor O'Neill. To approve the minutes, all in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is minutes of the Tri-Cities Healthier Communities Partnership meeting of Thursday, April 27th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Zerillo, second by Councillor Towner. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is minutes of the Sports Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, May 3rd. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, the Chair, second by Vice Chair Councillor Towner. All in favour? All opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns the Town Centre Park Master Plan Concept Plan and the review and feedback of that plan. The committee's recommendation is that Council direct staff to consider the relocation of parking lot B to the perimeter of the park.
Before I accept a motion on this, I wonder if it's possible to amend it to that Council requests staff. Is that the motion? The motion is moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Towner. I have Councillor Asmundson and then Hodge.
Well, my only problem with this one is we're talking about, there's no mapping or anything, so we're talking about, for me, when I read the minutes, I thought we're relocating the parking lot, but it doesn't give us any description or anything of it. So I think if this is recommendation is something to go to staff to come back for council at a later date to a final approval. I don't know exactly.
In fairness, this will, if staff hadn't already considered it, they will consider it. I suspect they have considered it, and it is part of the mix now, and they will nonetheless come back to us with their best recommendations, having considered it.
But even upon considering it, just sort of, there's a lack of information here onto what we're moving to consider. So that was just my point about this. I know we're considering it.
No, I get it. It was that subtly I was answering. As far as them coming back, obviously we would have enough information to know which is Lot B and where they're proposing to put it and those sorts of things. Mr. Alueva.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to clarify. This was actually raised by at committee by I believe Councillor Hodge, perhaps someone else. There was some discussion around the parking lot. Parking lot B is the parking lot between the turf fields, and the question was whether it should be considered as part of the Town Centre Park Master Plan work we're looking at a number of options, and the idea was relocating that to the edge of the park. So it did come up at committee. It was discussed then. There's obviously considerations and challenges that occur with any option, and as you recall, the council might recall, there's quite a number of still variable options, and this is one that was raised there, and we're certainly considering it as part of the upcoming work.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I meant to try and light up earlier here so I could give some explanation for council. First of all, this master plan is going out to community consultation, and it came to the last sports committee or sports advisory committee for consultation. So this was part of the discussion, and following the discussion, they wanted to ensure that their comment was recorded and that staff would consider it as part of the overall consultation process. As Mr. Lougheed mentioned, parking lot B is the lot that's right in the middle of the park. And it's the one that's constantly congested. It requires a lot of a driveway that comes into it. And a member of the committee had suggested that in reviewing the master park plan, that maybe that we should look at trying to move parking lots out closer to the roadway. They can be seen from the road. If they're full, then people will drive to the next one instead of going in. And so they presented a number of reasons why that it thinks it should be why they think it should be considered, but it's just an option and something that they wanted to have a comment made in regards to that lot. So it's on the sort of it's been highlighted for staff to look at. That was all they asked for.
Okay. Councillor Zrillo.
I'm fine. I got it. Thank you,
Yep.
Councillor Hodge.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thanks. For the record, Lot B is not in the middle of the park. It's at the very northern end of the park, but in the middle of the northern end of the park. Pardon me?
Yeah, the middle of the sports.
Well, it's not even in the middle of the sports. It's at the top. And so it's the one that you enter from off of Pipeline Road and then go past the top of Field 2 and Field 3, the Ted Fridge and Dominic Mobilio fields. The question I have here, and it's just, maybe it's just a comment. We all serve on a lot of advisory committees. Just about every advisory committee meeting that I've been on for the last several months has a staff member coming and making a report to it, giving them an update on this plan or that plan, or and seeking their feedback. And at every one of these advisory committee meetings, that committee gives feedback and the staff take notes. That's part of the general public feedback process. Very, very, very rarely does any advisory committee make a direct motion. So staff has already been asked by this committee to consider relocating the park, the parking lot, sorry. So is the fact that this came as a direct motion, as a motion to council, for us to basically ratify what they've already done, they've already requested staff to consider relocating. Is this of significance that this is, of all the feedback that they gave to staff, so important that it had to come to council? Or, I don't know, I'm just trying to understand why this. I'm sure they gave a lot of feedback. The minutes say they gave feedback on a lot of different things. Why this, of all the things? Is there some special reason why this came to council? And when staff already heard this from the committee? Do you recall? If not, that's fine.
That's okay.
Yeah, well, I think it would be the chair. Mr. Chair, can
I guarantee it won't be me.
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
going to ask the chair or the vice chair if either of them know.
Yeah.
Councillor Hodge.
I think there was a lot of discussion that night, but a lot of it was around parking, and that was from the sports side of things. There were certainly a lot of things that they liked about the plan that was being shown, and there was a lot of good feedback. But because I think that I think that they felt that they wanted to make sure that that message was heard and wasn't lost in just the overall general comment. And to be honest, I have asked my committees now to make recommendations to council, because that is their job, and also they cannot make direct recommendations to staff. They can provide feedback, but because they felt strongly enough that it was a recommendation, they felt that the appropriate venue was to go through council to advise council that this was one of their suggestions, but it doesn't go beyond anything other than a request to suggest and make sure that it forms part of their formal record. I don't know how well minutes or recommendations are recorded at these meetings by staff. Quite often, it's the person doing the presenting that's also doing the writing, and that can sometimes be challenging. So I think that council or the advisory committee wanted to make sure that was given significant prominence.
Right. So that's okay. So that's what I suspected. Of all the recommendations that they made and that staff took notes on, this was the one that was the most important that they wanted to get through.
Yeah, and I will mention it was not unanimous.
Oh, that's interesting. Good.
And some felt that it should be broadened to include all parking be considered. So the discussion was really around moving parking out of the center of the park, removing sort of roadways in, and trying to put parking lots around the outside of the park. But because this is the one that's primarily used by field users, because it's between four fields, this was the one that the discussion centered around. But I believe that staff, in the recording the notes, made mention that this did apply to a number of the parks. It was also a general comment about parking, and I believe that's why it may not have been unanimous, because some felt that it should be a broader resolution to include all parking.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, the question is the amended recommendation from the Sports Council. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item, item 4, pertains to the minutes of the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee's meeting of Wednesday, May 17th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved.
Moved by Chair Councillor Rasmussen, seconded by Vice Chair Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 pertains to the minutes of the Council and Committee meeting held on Monday, May 29th. The committee recommendation to Council was that the city support Mayor Stewart and Councillor Zerillo's participation on standing committees of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the costs associated thereof.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, second by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 pertains to a development permit authorization for exterior alterations to a commercial building at 1200 Lougheed Highway. Staff recommendations that Council approve the signing and sealing of this DP for 1200 Lougheed Highway, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, seconded by Councillor Hodge. I have one question, and that is that there's the largest signage on the building under the development permit is the number 1200. It appears on the front and on the back. It refers to 1200 Lougheed, although you cannot get at the building from Lougheed. This is attachment 5A and 5B, so that if someone were to call an ambulance and ask them to appear at 1200 Lougheed, they wouldn't be able to get to the building. So they would go to 1200 Woolridge, which is actually, because the building right across the street, Crash Crawley's, is a little bit to the west, and it's 1300, so no one's going to go east from 1300 to get to 1200, and so I don't understand. I realize the numbering system is inherited from a time when this building was likely accessible from Highway 7, but given that there's a solution in the offing with a development permit, can we not get the number that faces Woolridge to at least reflect its address on Woolridge, which would be an odd number in the 1300 block? And does it have to be that big? If it's going to be wrong, let's make it smaller.
Through the chair to
Mr. Fuji.
to Mr. Mayor, the address, as you point out, is on the development permit drawings. This reflects the, I guess, the street address assigned to the subject property. But you're right, the neighboring property to the west is off Woodward, so we'll work with the applicant to nail that down as we move along. And with regards to the signage, or I guess the size of the proposed signage, it does meet the requirements of the zoning of the sign bylaw. Sign bylaws is quite permissive.
Well, particularly with unit numbers. I'm not arguing about the size. I'm only pointing out that if it's that big, it should at least reflect the street address that you're going to approach the building from an emergency services point of view. And so that was my only concern. I thank you for taking that into account. Any other discussion? The question is a DP. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 pertains to zoning amendment bylaw number 4779 and the property at 3416 Queenston Avenue. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to see if Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4779, bylaw number 4779 be referred to public hearing, and that staff be instructed to complete the following items prior to council's consideration of fourth reading, should council grant second and third readings to the proposed bylaw, and that is submission of a subdivision plan to the satisfaction of the approving officer, required maintenance easements and party wall agreements relating to the 8 conventional street-oriented village home lots.
Moved by Councillor Cirillo, second by Councillor Asmundson. Finally, some street townhouses. All in favor? Opposed? We have first reading and a public hearing. Thank you. Carried unanimously.
Item number 8 pertains to the 2017 spring intake of the Spirit of Coquitlam grant and the Spirit of Coquitlam grant announcement. We have introductory comments by the General Manager, followed by a staff recommendation that says that Council endorse disbursements from the Community Capital Fund as follows: $223,171, made up of $199,275 for 2017 and $23,896 for 2018, to Spirit grants as part of the spring 2017 intake. And B, that $42,000 to support Coquitlam 2017 Communities in Bloom initiatives. And 2, the Council approve amendments to the Spirit Grant eligibility criteria and disbursement guidelines as found in Attachment 1 to the report before you to take effect in the fall of 2017.
Moved
by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Cirillo, A to Z. Councillor Towner.
Thank you. Per our discussion earlier today in committee, there's an amendment that I'd like to put forward to this regarding funding through the Spirit Grant for a piece of legacy artwork through the Canada 150 Mosaic National Mural Project. This would be a wonderful community-led, citizen-involved project in our city, and it would be a piece of permanent artwork.
And your motion is?
We can display for decades to come. So I think our city clerk is going to help with the wording of the motion.
Well, just a minute. We've been provided the wording, I guess. Mr. Clerk will read it out.
Thank you. As was discussed this afternoon, staff, primarily the General Manager of Parks, Recreation, Culture Services, and Ms. Morrison-Clark, have determined that the amendment, appropriate amendment to follow upon discussion this afternoon is to add an item 3 that Council directs staff to proceed with a process to solicit proposals from interested parties for a Spirit grant to participate in the Canada 150 Mural Mosaic Project for future Council consideration and approval.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Towner and seconded that we amend it to include the mural project. We'll put that amendment on the floor. If we will add that amendment to this motion in a second. Seeing no questions. Do you have anything further on the amendment? No. The question is the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. The motion as amended. Any discussion? Seeing none. The motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item, item 9, pertains to the 2017 council meeting schedule and proposed amendments to that already approved schedule. Staff recommendations that council approve the following amendments to the current 2017 council meeting schedule: the addition of a public hearing on July 10th and the addition of a finance standing committee meeting on November 2nd.
Moved by Councillor Towner, second by Councillor Asmundson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 10 is the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief for its meeting of May 26th. Our Metro Vancouver Board representatives are available to respond to questions and the staff recommendations that Council receive for information in the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Cirillo to receive. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Councillor O'Neill.
I have a notice of motion for
Oh, that's right.
time.
Yep.
It's time now?
Yes.
Good, okay. I've just distributed it to everybody by way of email. The clerk has it as well. I don't know if he has extra copies of it, just that he's got the signed copy. You have it on your email now. The notice of motion is therefore be it resolved that UBCM simplify the rules of procedure in the UBCM bylaws by amending section 23D to remove the requirement for a 3/5 brackets 60% and the brackets vote in order to remove a resolution from a block for separate consideration and debate, with such an amendment having the effect of allowing removal from a block by way of a simple majority, moved by me and it's seconded by Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I have motions now on the floor. Okay.
Want to move?
I'll move that we waive notice.
Councillor Hodge moves that we waive notice, I assume because of the deadlines related to resolutions and such. And
I've been informed that even if this goes to the next meeting, we will still be able to, we don't need to waive. The deadline is June 30th. The city clerk says that we can follow non-waiving procedure if we want to, but...
Fair enough. The motion to waive is on the floor, moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Asmundson over here. This one. I actually will support the motion to waive. I appreciate, particularly because I appreciate that Councillor O'Neill alerted colleagues that already gave notice of the notice of motion by way of email, which is always helpful. It allows us to consider the issue. Many of us have discussed this issue at previous UBCMs where I won't get into the detail of the motion, but I will support the motion to waive. Any discussion on the motion to waive? Notice? Seeing none. All in favor of waiving notice? All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The notice has been waived. The motion's on the floor. Councillor O'Neill.
Well, thank you very much for that. At the last UBCM meeting, at the beginning of the consideration of resolutions, there's a block of resolutions that either the executive or the resolutions committee has said are essentially no-brainers. I'm going to paraphrase, and that they feel can be voted on as a block. And there was one particular motion that I wanted to take out of that. I think it needed specific debate. And I was informed, and it is in the rules, that a simple majority of removing it from will not suffice to remove it from that block, but you needed 60%, even though once it was out, the regular 50% motion applies. So the notice of motion that's before you right now uses wording, it's almost word for word from that provided me by, and the city clerk who's been very helpful helping me with this, by the UBCM. They're aware that we're intending to do this. They provided us with the guidance on how to go about the right way. This will be an extraordinary resolution to amend the UBCM bylaws regarding removal of a resolution from a block. And then there's a couple of whereases, which you don't need to read out right now, but it will be available, certainly, because the clerk has it, if media or anybody in the public wants it. And thank you very much for allowing me to bring this forward. And yeah, it was quite a shock at the last UBCM meeting to find out that this procedure was there. So I think simple majority rule should suffice in this case. Thank you.
I thank you for that. I acknowledge that it was an amazing shock. I've done parliamentary work in lots of levels of lots of different government organizations, and I'd never before seen a supermajority required to remove something from a consent agenda, which has the effect of making it so that if you get something on a consent agenda, it will pass with 41% or 40% plus 1 support. That is, 40% plus 1 would oppose the requisite motion to remove it from the consent agenda, and that would suffice. to leave it in consent, it would then pass with the consent agenda, or else everyone would have to vote against the consent agenda because it would still require a simple majority to pass. Clearly, that doesn't make any constitutional sense in any way, and this is a mistake in the drafting, I think, of the bylaws of the organization, and I will support going forward with a resolution. Councillor Zarrillo.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to understand. So the whereases that you're talking about, Councillor O'Neill, are the ones in the UBCM bylaws, not the ones that you created on this motion, right?
I'm talking about, sorry, I mentioned two whereases, and those are the whereases in my motion.
So I wonder if, just because we are going to be voting tonight, if we could ask Councillor O'Neill just to read the whole thing so
Sure.
that the whole community knows if...
Right, and do all of the press representatives in the room have the motion,
Oh, there it is there.
or do they want it emailed to them? Okay.
I think it's a good idea to read it out since we are voting on it now, so that's fine. So it's a notice of motion, the extraordinary resolution to amend the UBCM bylaws regarding removal of a resolution from a block. Whereas Section 23A and D of the UBCM bylaws provide that voting delegates present at the annual convention may move to group resolutions for consideration as a block, with voting delegates enabled under certain conditions to remove removal of a resolution from the block for separate consideration and debate. And whereas the original motion to group resolutions for consideration as a block requires only a simple majority to pass, but a motion to remove a resolution from a block for separate consideration and debate must receive a 3/5 or 60% vote to pass. Therefore, be it resolved that UBCM simplify the rules of procedure in the UBCM bylaws by amending Section 23D to remove the requirement for a 3/5, 60% vote in order to remove a resolution from a block for separate consideration and debate, with such an amendment having the effect of allowing removal from a block by way of a simple majority. And that's the way it is.
There we go. All good? Any further discussion? Seeing none. Question is the motion, which was the subject of a notice of motion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Adjournment?
Okay, adjournment has been moved and seconded by Councillors Admonson and Towner. Before we adjourn, I do want to acknowledge that today is the World Day Against Child Labor. We actually saw some kids, several of us, kids at the parade yesterday, kids, newcomers from a war-torn country who had spent, a couple of whom I know had spent time as children having to work in Turkey, trying to support their families. And that happens around the world, and it's not malevolent necessarily, but it is certainly not what children should be doing. Children should be playing, children should be learning, and today is the World Day Against Child Labor, and I wanted to make that comment. The motion is to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We'll now open the floor to question period on tonight's council agenda. Are there any questions from the audience on tonight's council agenda? Please line up, single file. Any questions at all? Thank you all for coming.